Hello, welcome to episode 8 of Planet and the People, podcast all about climate change, and another episode that I am introducing from the streets of London, which is a slight deviation from the norm. So, had a brief week-long hiatus after releasing 2 episodes in one go, one about the aviation industry and one about biochar 2 weeks ago. So this week's episode is all about a really, really exciting organisation which was founded and which is led by really, really, really exciting inventor and entrepreneur Boyan Slat. Boyan Slat devised technology to clear the oceans of plastic effectively when he was just 18, and he started up the Ocean Cleanup. Now, I caught up with Rachel Richardson, who works in the comms team at the Ocean Cleanup, while she was on her way back from a site visit in Guatemala and stopping off at Honduras just a few weeks ago, and she was able to tell me all about where it all started, how it all started with the Ocean Cleanup, and all about what they do. So, without further ado, I will pass you over to my past self and Rachel Richardson from the Ocean Cleanup. Hello, Rachel. Thank you very much for talking to me today. So you work for the Ocean Cleanup. Some people might have heard of the Ocean Cleanup, but as a quick, rough first overview, what is the Ocean Cleanup? That's a big question. Your eyes.
I know this one like the back of my hand. I could say it in my sleep. But thank you for having me. And I work for the Ocean Cleanup. The Ocean Cleanup is a non-profit organization who is developing advanced technologies to rid the world's oceans of plastic. We're based out of the Netherlands, and we're a small team of about 100 people, I think 95, give or take, of scientists, engineers, computational modelers, support staff, communications professionals, all working together to stop plastic from entering the ocean through the rivers with our Interceptor, and then to clean up what's already out in the ocean and the ocean gyres with our ocean technology.
And how did you personally get involved with the Ocean Cleanup?
So I am originally from the States, and when I moved to the Netherlands, I wanted to volunteer and network, and so I started volunteering with TEDx Delft, because that's where I live in the Netherlands. And Boyan gave his TEDx talk that went viral it was with TEDx Delft. So when I started, Boyan was the poster child. Everything we did, every event we were planning, we wanted another Boyan talk. And so I got to know of it through that, and then met people via, and was really excited to get involved.
You mentioned briefly Boyan, but Boyan Slat, tell me a little bit more about him, because he is quite an extraordinary person. Tell me more about him.
Yeah, so Boyan is the founder and CEO of the Ocean Cleanup. He, the famous story that, again, another one I could tell in my sleep, is that when he was 16 years old, he went diving in Greece and he saw more plastic bags than fish. And he thought, why can't we just clean this up? And he was a tinkerer, a curious guy, still is to this day. But it was a kind of idea that, he couldn't just kick. So he started exploring ways to, solve it, was researching it, and read about the gyres, which are the ocean garbage patches. So there are 5 main ones, and the biggest one is the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. So he thought, well, start big. And so he came up with this idea of creating coastlines where there are none in the middle of the ocean, because that's where you see a lot of plastic is beached.
Oh, okay.
But so Boyan's the one who came up with that idea, and he was 17, and then he started going to universities and asking people for their input and their expertise, and he did a bit more studying himself, going and getting the trawls to collect plastic. And he pitched the idea at a TEDx event, and he was studying aerospace engineering at this time now. He was, I think, a few months into his degree, and then decided that this was what he needed to put his attention to. So he dropped out of school and tried to get people involved, and people were just, it was a lot of no phone calls. And then one night, as these things happen, the video went viral on social media. And
that was his pitch at the TEDx.
Yeah. So he was, at this time, he was 17, young kid, just a little germ of an idea that inspired people. And that's kind of where it all started. And he's still a tinker, a curious guy. He's one of the smartest people I've met. And sometimes it's so awe-inspiring, and sometimes it's so frustrating because I'm like, I have no idea what you're saying, but in a good way. And yeah, he's still a really great leader too. And so it's cool that he's still so involved in the organization. And we work very closely with him in the comms team because we are, we own the brand, and the brand is very much, I think, embedded in him.
So tell me a little bit more about how the technology works. So you sort of set up these artificial coastlines in the middle of the ocean, which helps the plastic gather towards them? Yeah,
so that was kind of the first idea, was this massive 100-kilometer long moored system that was moored to the seabed, and it utilized the natural forces of the ocean, so the wind, waves, and the currents. The next kind of idea was then doing a fleet of systems that had anchors, and then they dropped the anchor, and then I guess one thing I should kind of introduce first is the ocean cleanup one of their kind of engineering principles is the iterative design approach. So we are all about testing, learning, incorporating, repeat. So we know that we're never fully settled on something. We have to learn in the moment, and we have to learn in the field. And so now, full circle to answer your question more directly, the current concept of the cleanup design is you have a floating barrier that has a skirt underneath, and the main, I guess, kind of one of the main foundational principles is that you have to have a speed difference, a consistent speed difference between the plastic and the system, because otherwise, if you see stuff, plastic can go away. So you need either the plastic to go faster or the system to go faster. The last version that we tested in 2019 was with a parachute sea anchor that slowed the system down so that the plastic could get into the system a bit quicker. So that's currently what the design looks like now, and our team since then has been testing more and more to take those learnings, and then now we're designing System 2, which will go out this summer.
What is System 2?
It's the next cleanup system.
Oh, the same technology, but just
with
another one.
Yeah, with more of the insights from our last deployment incorporated into the design.
You mentioned, which is something that I didn't know, you mentioned these 4 big sites. Did you say 4? I was going to ask, does the plastic just float unanimously through the ocean, but it does actually gather in specific areas of the ocean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you have, and this is my communications understanding of it. You could probably have a much more seasoned person on the topic explain it better than me, but this is how I'll explain it. So you have the 5 main gyres, which is where the currents converge and create kind of vortices in various parts of the ocean. And what happens is the buoyant plastic, the really like the PPE, the PE plastic, those harder plastics, bottle caps, fishing nets, things like that, those will get caught in these currents and then just follow them. And then they get stuck in these garbage patches and just swirl. And sometimes it gets out and then will go on its way and then most likely end up on a beach. But a lot of it persists and it just hangs out there in the middle of the ocean. And we did a study, those 5 years of reconnaissance missions that we published in 2018 that determined that the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, the one that we're going to clean, is huge. It's twice the size of Texas. It's 3 times the size of France. There are 1.3 trillion pieces of plastic there. It's a lot. So that's where we're starting, and that's there are 5. But you have the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, which is notoriously the biggest one.
That's alarming in a sense of if you weren't here, if the ocean cleanup wasn't there, that's quite alarming. But that also makes it a little bit easier, does it? To sort of know that it's all there. It's not kind of just spread everywhere. Is that the right?
I wish it was that easy because it would make all of our jobs so much easier. But the thing is it's such an unstudied area as well. People, I mean, even stepping back, right? The plastic phenomenon is only, I mean, it's less than 100 years old. Plastic was only introduced in the 50s. And before it really became a kind of a global problem was, many decades after that. So it's also understanding the dynamics of how it interacts with water, the chemicals on it, and it all moves differently. Like one piece of plastic will react differently than another. So we can do this modeling, but you never really know till you're out there and you can really observe it. And another thing, while it's great that it's in this area, it's a massive area, and so the plastic's pretty widely dispersed. So yeah, so it's like trying to I don't know, drag a mower through Texas. It would probably take you a really long time to get from one end to the other. A terrible example. I think the leaf blower analogy is what we use in the leaf blower.
No, that's actually a really good analogy. Well, is that an accurate analogy? Is it literally like driving a mower through Texas? Because that sounds very insurmountable. I wanted to ask also a little bit about the river interceptors. Is that a little bit of a newer phenomenon?
So it's new in the sense that we introduced it in 2019, but the ocean cleanup was working on it kind of covertly for several years. I want to say it was about 5 years. So the Interceptor was launched in 2019, and it is our solution to stopping plastic before it reaches the ocean. It's autonomous, it's solar powered, and it uses a conveyor system, a barrier, and it distributes it into dumpsters, and then you take it to the site, to the quay, I think is what they call it, the quay. I never know how to pronounce it.
The quay.
The quay, thank you. I always want to say quay because I'm pronouncing it phonetically, but you would not think that I did communications for a living.
Yeah, it's one of those weird words, isn't it?
Yeah.
So the ocean interceptors, did they literally just, they're big boats that sit in the river and then have this outward, I'm doing a big gesture which can't be heard on a podcast, but
I love it.
It has this outward sort of arm that collects the plastic.
It's fixed in that it's stationed in one place, and it's a catamaran design, so it floats on the surface, and then there is indeed a barrier that connects from the interceptor that is attached in such a way that it will, the plastic will hit the barrier, and then it'll guide it up to the conveyor belt, and then the conveyor belt automatically and evenly distributes the plastic amongst 6 dumpsters, and then it will notify the local operators when it's completely full.
Okay. What's the situation with sea life with these contraptions, with both the river interceptor and the ocean nets, for want of a better word? What do you call them? I don't want to keep on saying the contraptions.
We call them ocean systems. So it's
the ocean systems.
It's a system of, things that work together, I guess. I don't know why we call it a system, actually. I should have questioned that.
Is there a risk to sea life, to fish, of getting caught up, of getting picked up as well as the plastic?
The thing is before we do anything in the ocean, we will perform environmental impact assessments. We do environmental monitoring while we're out there. There's always a chance of bycatch. We do our best to understand what those possibilities are, and we try to mitigate that as much as we can. And we do these environmental impact assessments to understand if we will have any population level effects. And it's because it's really complicated, right? Like, we want to go out there and clean up this plastic that's harmful to sea life. The plastic out there is already very harmful to sea life. And so we want to clean that up. But there is always a chance of interaction, but we don't know exactly what that's like. For instance, when we were out there with our other 2 systems, what we mainly observed was that a lot of marine life, would pass by, or birds would sit on the system to rest, things like that. All of the risks were considered somewhat minimal. And we have mitigation, we have marine species experts out there so that should we see anything, we can intervene as quickly as possible. But I think like anything out there, I think anything you do, there's always a chance of interaction. So I can't say there's absolutely no risk. So when we go out there, one of the things that's really important for us is to get as much data and observations as possible so we can understand it and mitigate and adapt when needed. So it's a very convoluted answer, but it is very nuanced, and it's
it is a tricky one. I can understand that. I want to ask if you have any sort of stats about how much plastic is going into the oceans each year. Are we winning? Are we losing? Are you sort of feeling like you've got the Great Pacific Garbage? Is that what you called it? The
Great Pacific Garbage Patch.
That sounds like a really exotic name.
The Garbage Patch. Yeah.
But the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. Do you feel like there's a losing battle? Do you feel like there's just still so much plastic coming into the oceans that you're noticing?
Yeah, there is, which is only makes our work more urgent. Makes us feel like we need to be acting fast in a way that's just efficient and smart and getting out there to get as much plastic as we can, because it is getting worse by the day, and it's to solving it's multifaceted approach. We've chosen the path of developing technology and to catching it once it's already in the environment. But you have to do so much more, and so it's a global problem that takes global effort, and it's not easy. We can all attest to that. It has its challenges, and sometimes I think even Boyan has said himself, if someone had told me then how hard it would be, I might not have done it. It is really, really complicated thing, but it's so necessary. I think anyone can attest to it, and it's so profound how it affects not just our ocean, but local communities. I mean, we have interceptors in the Dominican Republic and Indonesia and Malaysia, about to be Vietnam, and we're looking at other countries now as well. And when we visit these countries, you see how it not only affects, because we all think we see it on the beaches and the ocean, but then when you're just in these cities and you see how it affects people's local waterways and just their own streets, it's pervasive, and so you do need everyone to work on it, and this is what we're choosing. And I don't think that it's a deterrent. It's just more of a motivator.
No, I suppose when I said, are you feeling like, how have you noticed? Do you notice whether the intake of plastic from the oceans has gone up or gone down in recent years? Basically, are we pumping more out there than we used to, or is it starting to go down? Do you think the world is starting to pump less plastic in the oceans, is what I'm asking?
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know the science on this. I'm speaking from my personal perspective. I think people are shifting. I think people are seeing it. I mean, you have things like social media where people see one video and it changes their whole approach to, how they consume. And I don't know what it looks like from 2015 to, today, but I think, my personal perspective is that the more people see these initiatives, the more people are aware of it, the more the issue itself is brought to mind. And I think awareness is always the first step, right? Like, no, some people don't know how bad it is until they see something like that. And I think we're working towards a shift there. I think you see legislation, you see celebrities getting involved, you see companies working with, biodegradables, not plastic, finding all other alternative options. I quantitatively, I couldn't tell you. I'm sure someone could. I couldn't. But I think, from my personal perspective, I think that we are shifting. I think there is a shift happening.
I wanted to ask how you choose where to put your river interceptors, for example. You mentioned a few countries where you've got them. are there places where plastic waste is worse?
Yep.
Or is it sort of a random selection?
No. It's so actually in about, 2 weeks, we will be publishing our paper on just that. It's the rivers that are most responsible for plastic pollution. And,
Okay.
and our research team has found that it's 1,000 rivers are responsible for about 80% of the plastic flowing from rivers into oceans.
Oh, wow.
Sounds big, sounds massive, but in the grand scheme of things, when you have about 100,000 rivers, it's only I say in quotation marks,
1,000, only
1,000 rivers, but it's 1%. So if we can take that approach, and so that's what we're doing. We're trying to work in countries where it can be effective, and then we did start with some of these countries that do have polluting rivers, but also, so the Interceptor is still kind of a novel technology. It's still somewhat being prototyped. So where it's deployed now is also the result of local governments and operators who took a chance to try to test this technology on our behalf, who knew that it was important. So it's kind of a two-way thing. It was us choosing places, but also other people believing in the idea.
That does actually. I personally wasn't overwhelmed by that figure of 1,000. That's almost feels quite manageable. It's a huge number, but it also feels quite like once you've got that very specific number, it's in the greater scheme of things, the amount of rivers that are out there. It actually feels suddenly more attainable. Yeah. So, what happens to the plastic after you pick it up?
So it's kind of two different scenarios. The plastic in the ocean, it's international waters, it's no man's land, which is also why no one's really cleaned it up so far, because it hasn't been anyone's, problem, so to speak. So that what we clean up is something we need to do something with. The plastic or the pollution in the rivers, it's different everywhere it is, but the way we set up our interceptor technologies is we work with a local consortia. So we have to work with governments, we find a local operator, people to fund it, and then it's kind of us giving them the technology to take care of that. And so that works with their local waste management and recycling practices. So that's for the rivers, but for the ocean, we do bring back plastic. And actually last year, using the first catch from when we were out in 2019, we tested our potential funding model that we always envisioned, or especially Boyan from almost day one, was to use the plastic and turn it into something, and then use the funds from that to fund more cleanup. So use plastic to get more plastic, because we're a nonprofit, so we're not in this to make money. So with this plastic, we made our first product, which are sunglasses.
Yes.
And they're made with, we worked with a third-party independent certification body to verify that the plastic was from where it's from. And so it's made, the sunglasses, the frames themselves are made of certified plastic from the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, and then they're made with other various recycled materials, except for the lenses, because the lenses are a bit more complicated to have the polarization. So that's kind of our plan. And so we introduced that last year. We have just surpassed the 50% mark of selling what we have in stock, which was exciting. And we hope to validate that model. And then when we go back and get more plastic, make something different, and then so on and so forth.
So I was actually going to ask about how is it funded. And I suppose one of the big things is that you actually sell the stuff that you take in as products. So how can we as individuals support the work you're doing?
In many ways. So simply liking us on social media and following us, sharing our posts, just helping spread the word, which is usually the easiest and I think one of the more fun ways to get involved. There you can also donate. Go to our website and donate directly. You can buy a pair of sunglasses. They're €200 or $200. You can also apply to work with us. We need smart minds. We need people who are eager and excited to tackle this problem, because it is, like I said, it's a collective effort where we can't do it alone. Yeah, you reduce your use of single-use plastics. Try not to get more out there. Yeah, I think find what works within your means and share, clean, reduce, reuse, recycle, things like that.
Is there anything that can be done about microplastics that are in the ocean? Is that something that you pick up, or is that just too hard at the moment?
Yeah, we did find with our last system, we were able to catch microplastics down to, I think, half a millimeter, but I'd have to double check. But we were able to collect microplastics when we were out there. But that is a big thing. And that's part of why another sense of that urgency. So sure, there's lots coming in every day, but then what is also out there is breaking down. And so it's the more it breaks down, the harder it is to get. And that's also part of we say it's a ticking time bomb. All this plastic that's out in these patches is getting, photo degradation and just pulling apart in the sun. And then animals are eating it, or, some of it sinks, or it just floats there, and it just gets even more difficult to clean. So there is something to be done, and it's really stopping the big pieces. So trying to get out there and clean up all these big pieces, because you have these derelict fishing nets called ghost nets that, they have the fibers, those can come off when the plastic breaks down. So it's there can be something done, but it's really trying to just get the big stuff out while you can.
Yeah. So I suppose to sort of wrap up, how are you feeling as in about everything, about the state of things, about the level of plastic that's in the oceans, about climate change in general, about how the world is doing to combat everything, but especially in your specific sphere in the plastic in the oceans?
Yeah, so I could be in two minds about it. It's immense, and when you see it firsthand, it can be heart-wrenching. But I try not to focus on that, because I think there are so many people doing something, that people are passionate, and I believe in the goodness of humanity, which maybe is a bit naive, but I think we are all working towards something better. And I don't know, I feel hopeful. Working at the Ocean Cleanup has been one of the most wonderful experiences of my life. It's the energy, the excitement, the drive is palpable. Everyone there is so smart and so driven, and we're all rooted with the same cause. And when I'm around that, it sounds so cheesy, but I really do believe magic is possible. I believe we can do anything, and it's so hard, and it's not, it hasn't been easy, and it won't be easy, but when you have the right people, I think that makes the difference. And I think we're just a small, subset of the whole world, and there are people all around the world doing stuff. There's so many amazing organizations working to, help change legislation, help clean up in impoverished countries, or help change in less impoverished countries, the local infrastructure and things like that. So there are a lot of people out there, and that gives me hope, is that I think we're all doing something, and I don't think we'll stop till we see a good change.
Yeah, I have to say I've spoken to such a range of people on this podcast, some of whom are representing organizations that are doing something, others of whom just have views or expertise about a certain area, and it's really exciting to talk to someone like you and talk to someone like you about an organization like the Ocean Cleanup, because it really is. There's so much doom and gloom in the climate change narrative and in the environmental narrative. It just sometimes seems so overwhelming and depressing, and that's why I really wanted to speak to you, because I think what you're doing is fantastic.
Thank you.
It really is.
Yeah, and it is. It's I know me, but what the organization's doing is really wonderful. So, I appreciate that too, because I do see it a lot. It's easy to watch the videos and to read the numbers, and I'd be in the fetal position if I really just took it all to heart. So,
yeah.
this is the safe alternative for me, my mental health.
And you mentioned that paper that is out in 2 weeks. That is actually when I'm going to release this episode. So is that available to the public, that paper, or is it just within journal? Okay.
Right now, the planned publication date is April 30th. So we'll have great videos and blog posts and a link to the paper itself on the journal.
About the sunglasses, do they come in lots of different styles?
No. You better like the classic, Wayfarer, because that's exactly what they are.
That is exactly the sort of sunglasses that I wear. So
perfect.
Yeah, I'm gonna get on and buy a pair.
And check them out. They're beautiful, and the texture's great, and each piece, every single one's unique because we use this very unique plastic, and we try not to make it so uniform. So the kind of grain in it is unique to every pair, and you get to see, you kind of, it's your way of, you're holding something that was once floating in the middle of the ocean. It's kind of a cool idea when you think about it.
Well,
check them out.
Yeah, I will. On that note, I suppose, unless there's anything more you would like to add.
No? Okay. Good. I nothing else to add on my side. I could talk as long as the day is, so it's probably always good to have a hard stop. Yeah, I love doing stuff like this. And actually, if you go back and watch our launch video from 2018, where we launched our first system, I'm the live stream reporter, so I'm riding alongside the system reporting. So I loved it so much. I just love telling the story of the ocean cleanup. So any chance I get, I'm very excited and eager to do so.
That was Rachel Richardson from the Ocean Cleanup. If you'd like to hear a little bit more about the Ocean Cleanup, I've included details of their website in the show notes. I will also include the link to the study that Rachel mentioned about where the plastics come from, which rivers they are in, but that won't be available until the 30th of April, so I'll include that on the show notes from the 30th of April onwards. So that brings us to the end of episode 8. Next week I am going to be back with an episode all about fashion. Fast fashion, fashion full stop. What's wrong with it, what's right with it, how to do it well from an environmental and a humanitarian point of view, really. But that's next week. If you've enjoyed this episode, please do click subscribe so you never miss a future one. That brings me to the end of the episode. I'm on social media at Planet and the People on Instagram and Facebook, and at Planet and the P on Twitter. I'm going to go home now and buy me some ocean cleanup sunglasses. Goodbye.